All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you all for showing up this morning. To officially welcome back Kelly Krauskopf as President of Basketball Business Operations for the Indiana Fever.
What if the one person who has the potential to take the WNBA to new heights is also the one that the league's establishment is covertly attempting to destroy? The question may seem like a paranoid fantasy, but millions of fans believe that Caitlin Clark is the target of a covert war due to a string of startling on-court incidents, acrimonious off-court remarks, music, and a ruthless, callous decision from the highest levels of authority music. The reality of this developing story is much darker and more complicated than anyone could have predicted, exposing a league at odds with its own prosperity. The Indiana Fever's selection of Caitlin Clark with the first overall pick was hailed as a historic moment that would change the course of women's professional basketball. She wasn't your average gifted rookie. Music. She was a marauding supernova and a cultural force of nature who had radically changed college viewership and record books. MLB playoff games and Stanley Cup finals were not drawing as many spectators as her contests. The league was forced to switch from commercial planes to private charters by her alone. She was the golden goose, the selected one. Veterans had been calling for this change for years. Tickets on the secondary market skyrocketed to previously unheard-of levels, and arenas that had earlier had seas of empty seats were selling out in minutes. Music. The impact of Caitlin Clark was immediate, palpable, and genuine. Everything was lined up for a magnificent coronation, a hero's entry into the professional ranks that would elevate the sport as a whole. Music, instead, though, she was brutally and unrelentingly baptized by fire. Music, a gauntlet replaced the welcome mat that had been removed from beneath her. It was terrifyingly obvious from her first game that this would not be a smooth adjustment. The physicality existed on a completely different level. Defenders weren't only taking up space, they were also larger, stronger, and quicker. With each bump, music shove, and hard screen, they were conveying a message. However, this was more than just a formidable, expert defense. It was so intimate. Music. It was a focused, brutal campaign that appeared to have been painstakingly planned to punish her, confine her, and make her doubt her role in this league. And that unsaid message was about to be conveyed in the most blatant, indisputable manner imaginable, igniting a flurry of controversy that would pull back the curtain and reveal the gloom. Mash the league's bitter underbelly. The blows she was receiving on the court were only the beginning of a worse tale. It was during a heated game against the Chicago Sky that everyone in the sports world understood something was seriously, profoundly wrong. It wasn't a tough box out under the rim or a hard screen while battling for position. Kennedy Carter delivered a brutal blindside shoulder check that had no place in the game of basketball. Carter assaulted Clark in addition to committing a foul. Clark was thrown forcibly to the ground by a cheap, cowardly, and obvious shot that was delivered far from the ball. The world erupted in a unified cry of protest as soon as the play got viral. This wasn't a welcome to the league musical moment. This message was delivered with malicious intent and was an intentional attempt to do harm. Together with her partner Angel Reese's obvious, joyous celebration on the sidelines, Carter's arrogant refusal to respond to any inquiries regarding the incident following only served to fan the flames. Music. The deep-seated animosity and hatred that many had feared were simmering beneath the league's surface were revealed by this one horrible occurrence, which came to represent all that was wrong. Fans learned everything they needed to know from the WNBA's pitiful initial response, which was a mere common foul that was only raised to a flagrant one after intense public criticism. The biggest star in the league would not be shielded. Caitlin Clark was by herself. There was more than one player on one team involved in this conflict. The phenomenon spread throughout the entire league. It was a concerted push by veterans who believed she had not paid her dues or earned her stripes. However, a much more terrifying story started to surface from a place no one wanted to believe, her own locker room, while everyone else was discussing the foul and the league's cowardice. Music. As the season went on, a very unsettling trend emerged that was impossible for professional basketball experts, retired players, and internet detectives to ignore. Arguably the world's best shooter, Caitlin Clark, would be wide open on the perimeter, hands music up, calling for the ball on numerous plays, only to have her teammates completely ignore her. There was no denying the tape. While Clark stood by himself, passes would be forced into players who were double covered in the paint, guaranteeing 3 points. Now, the Indiana Fever's encore chemistry didn't simply seem strange. It appeared shattered, broken, and occasionally purposefully sabotaged. Frustrated body language, irritated looks toward music, the bench. The team became known for its quiet, intense huddles. A terrifying and increasingly convincing conspiracy theory was born out of the discussion that erupted on social media. To keep her stats low and humble her, her own team was purposefully limiting her touches and freezing her out. Were they envious of the unheard-of level of media exposure, the enormous multi-million-dollar Nike contract, which included music, a trademark shoe, and the indisputable reality that a 22-year-old rookie was now the center of the franchise's identity? These suspicions continued despite experienced standout Aaliyah Boston's mysterious post-game remarks. Her responses to reporters' questions on the apparent lack of chemistry were frequently condensed, evasive, and rife with corporate jargon, suggesting a deeper annoyance she was unable to express in public. The story was quickly changing from a straightforward account of a rookie finding it difficult to adjust to the terrifying prospect of an internal revolt. Were the players who were meant to be her allies deliberately undermining this generational potential in addition to her opponents? This internal conflict produced the ideal storm: music, a chaotic and mistrustful atmosphere. The hostility wasn't limited to the court, just as the league's influential old guard was music, getting ready to deliver an even more explicit, formal, and destructive message. The most reputable voices in the league were amplifying it in the media. Veteran actors from the past and present could launch a covert but tenacious effort to minimize her importance and normalize the cruel treatment she was receiving. The most well-known example came from WNBA great Diana Taurasi, who coldly foresaw Clark's impending reality even before she was recruited. A remark that, in retrospect, seems more like a menacing forecast or even a threat than an objective analysis. While conveniently ignoring the obvious fact that no rookie in the history of professional sports music has ever entered a league with this level of a target on their back, other players and commentators rationalized the unrelenting physicality by callously dismissing it as standard operating procedure for any rookie. The discussion unavoidably became more fraudulent and complicated. To discussing the extremely delicate dynamics of a white player music, rising to prominence in a league that is predominantly black. The amazing legacies of the black women who had labored in relative obscurity for years to construct the WNBA from the ground up were unjustly and unintentionally obliterated by the media's unrelenting savior narrative, as many correctly noted. This led to a perfect storm of righteous outrage, cultural friction, and professional jealousy. The old guard, who believed their enormous achievements were being ruthlessly ignored, and the new phenomena, who symbolized a profound change in the financial and cultural environment of athletics, engaged in an intellectual struggle. She wasn't the rising tide that lifts all boats to them. She was a tidal wave of hype that threatened to destroy everything they had worked so hard to create. Millions of fans would be left stunned, confused, and completely deceived by the decision made at the highest level of the sport as a result of this simmering unspoken dispute that was about to become an official, unquestionable policy. The committee tasked with representing the United States of America on the international scene provided the ultimate devastating evidence that there were strong institutional forces actively working against Caitlin Clark, not a rival athlete or a jealous teammate. Caitlin Clark was excluded from the USA Olympic squad for the Paris Games in a decision that defied every reason: financial, competitive, and otherwise. The whole international sports world was rocked by the decision. It was unintelligible. This was the world's most watched, most talked about, and most popular basketball player. A woman who recently demonstrated that she could bring Super Bowl-level viewership to a niche sport. She was also told that she wasn't competent enough to be a reserve. Music. The committee's formal justifications were weak, obvious, and, to be honest, music offensive. They mentioned her purported lack of experience with the senior national team and her vague desire for team cohesion. Music. Everyone with a head knew the true reason, even though some of the players who did make the squad had less experience or were having statistically worse seasons. This was the strongest gatekeeping action possible. "You are not one of us," the establishment's official statement bellowed from the ivory tower of American basketball. "We don't give a damn about how famous you are, how many admirers you have, or how much money you make. Music. You are not welcome to this private club." It was a disastrous, self-defeating choice. It felt like an official declaration of war against the future of their own sport since it was so obviously motivated by pride, politics, and personal passions. All eyes were on the Indiana Fever's front office as the Globe went crazy and the sports media went crazy. They had just been publicly humiliated on a global scale by their franchise player, their golden goose, and the only source of their renewed significance. Their answer would disclose all of their true allegiances. With their star player in the heart of a worldwide firestorm, everyone was waiting for the Indiana Fever organization to make a big comeback. Sponsors, commentators, and fans all anticipated an intense, emotional defense of their player. They expected a public statement of steadfast support for their troubled youngster and a harsh press release denouncing the Olympic Committee's absurd choice. Instead, they were met with a deafening, deliberate, and soul-crushing stillness. Fever. Only the most calculated, clinical, corporate-approved statements music about concentrating on the WNBA season, Caitlin's promising future, and the significance of the long term were made by President Lynn Dunn and the rest of the front staff. There was no emotion, no anger, no fire, and no fight at all. And the actual awful choice from the video's title was eventually exposed in that terrifying moment of inaction. It wasn't a contentious roster snub or a single hard foul. The Indiana Fever made the tough strategic decision to forego going to war for their most prized asset, music. Rather than stand up for the individual who was solely financing their team's comeback, they opted to play the political game to avoid upsetting the league's influential and spiteful establishment. It was a crushing betrayal, an unequivocal statement to Clark that she was not a player to be defended and supported but rather a commodity, an asset to be controlled and profited. They eagerly packed their arena to the rafters and sold her jerseys by the truckload. However, they recoiled and retreated when it came time to defend her against the firmly established old guard. This callous economic calculation demonstrated that even her own organization was prepared to temporarily jeopardize her well-being in order to preserve their precarious position within the league's strict and merciless power system. The Olympic snub music. And this deliberate quiet revealed a horrifying reality about the brutal nature of professional sports. A fundamental clash between two strong opposing forces is at the heart of the entire expansive conflict. The inflexible entrenched culture and the unstoppable money machine music. The money is Caitlin Clark. Her rookie wage is a startlingly meager $76,000, which she probably makes back for the league in a single game's quarter. She is individually in charge of bringing in tens of millions of dollars for the WNBA as a whole. NBA music. Venues with 20,000 seats are now sold out by teams who used to play in front of modest crowds in tiny college gyms. All because she's on the other team's roster. The value of the league's national television rights agreement is expected to soar from only $60 million to possibly over $240 million. Her presence was nearly entirely responsible for the record leap. She is the most valued asset in the history of women's professional sports by every possible financial metric. However, she faces a strongly ingrained culture and an old generation of executives and veterans who feel ignored, humiliated, and fiercely opposed to the drastic change she stands for. Music. Her quick ascent is perceived by them as a personal insult and a challenge to their established hierarchy, and their hard-won history in the league is now caught in a perplexing, self-destructive paradox rather than as a gift to the sport, music. It yearns for Caitlin Clark's money, relevancy music, and widespread recognition. However, it appears to be essentially hesitant to embrace the cultural change that she will unavoidably bring. From the Olympic Selection Committee to the league's own front office, important decision-makers seem to be putting the damaged egos of a few influential veterans ahead of the long-term financial stability and rapid expansion of the entire business. A league at war with itself, with its biggest star caught in the crossfire, is revealed by this battle, which makes no business sense at all. What does Caitlin Clark's future in the WNBA realistically hold, given her proclaimed opponents on the court, the possibility of coldness in her own locker room, and the league office's shocking choices that go against its own best interests? One of the most exciting, turbulent, and high-stakes sagas in contemporary sports history is taking place right now. Caitlin Clark is both the WNBA's largest apparent issue and its undeniable salvation. Music. She is a generational player with unicorn talent who must contend with a coordinated campaign of physical aggression on the court, a possible conspiracy of silence in her own locker room, and a political machine at the top level of the sport that appears determined to humiliate her at every opportunity. There is no turning back at this crucial juncture for the league. Unprecedented growth, international recognition, and unthinkable financial riches are the results of one road. All of them rested on this unique superstar's slim shoulders. The alternative route is one of insular gatekeeping, pride, and tradition. A route that might alienate millions of new fans, waste a once-in-a-lifetime chance, and mishandle the biggest gift the sport has ever received. What's left is a terrifying question. Is the WNBA elite eager to ruin its own golden goose only to make a point because it is so consumed by its own tradition and ego? Or is this unrelenting, cruel, and seemingly never-ending trial by fire a covertly planned tactic to turn her into a legend so indisputable, resilient, and unstoppable that she can no longer be disregarded or denied? In addition to defining Caitlin Clark's career, the answer to that issue will affect the WNBA's overall destiny.